If you've ever received any diagnosis, whether it's mild or life-altering, you know the immediate fear, confusion, and sense of helplessness that comes along with that diagnosis. But what if I told you how you respond to that diagnosis is just as, or if not more important than the diagnosis itself? In this video, I'm going to break down the exact steps I would take if I were ever diagnosed with anything. And at the end of the video, I'm going to share the one thing that I think is the most critical to achieve any level of dramatic healing. So stick around because this video might just change the way you look at health forever. My name is David Haas, and this channel is where personal growth meets implementation. I spent the last 20 years uncovering transformations, healings, and the power of the mind. And there's one thing that I know for certain. How we respond to challenges, including diagnoses, has a dramatic impact on the outcome. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly what I would do from a spiritual perspective if I were ever diagnosed with anything. These aren't just theoretical ideals. These are practical, actionable guides to taking back your power, no matter what's happening inside of your body right now. So if you're ready to change the way you think about your health and healing, stick around and let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing that I would do is get the right doctor, and let me explain that. So there was a study, actually I have it right here, it's called the Milgram experiment. It was a series of psychological experiments conducted by psychologist Stanley Milgram at Yale in 1961. And basically these experiments were aimed to measure individuals' willingness to obey authority figures, even when it instructed to perform actions conflicting with their own personal consciousness. And so what does that mean? So basically what they did was they took a student come in and they had a doctor in a lab coat and they were doing a test. They had another guy in a room behind glass. And every time the person behind the glass answered a question wrong, they were instructed by the doctor to give the person a shock. Now the person getting the shock was an actor, and the student was the one that had to press the button to give the person the shock. What they found was even when the person getting the shock was experiencing extreme pain, like crying and doing all these things and begging to stop, and the doctor, the perceived doctor in the lab coat, was telling them to keep shocking them, the person continued to shock them beyond the point where they would have normally have stopped. And so what this highlights is the power that we give to authority. So when you go into a doctor's office and you are diagnosed with a disease, you are giving that person all of your power. And so what I think is critical is if a doctor tells you that you have cancer, for example, that belief that you have cancer may be enough because it's coming from this authority figure to kill you, okay? And so all I'm saying that I would do in step one is I would find a doctor that is aligned with the belief that I can heal from whatever it is that I'm up against. And they exist. So I would get a second opinion, essentially is where I would get this step. I would try and align and find a doctor who has a belief in my own ability to heal from within. And they are out there. There's all kinds of people that have healed from all kinds of things, but you have to look and you probably have to spend a little bit of money. But if you can find a doctor that believes that you can heal just because of this power that we have given to doctors in society, that power, when you find the right doctor, might be enough to start your healing so that you can heal from whatever it is that you're suffering from. But if you just go to one doctor who tells you you're gonna die, you probably are. So now you found a doctor that believes you can heal. We've looked around for second opinions. The second thing you're gonna do is you're gonna change everything about your lifestyle. There's a movie out there, it's called The Guitar, and I'm gonna give it away. So if you've never watched it, then, you know, spoiler alert, I guess. But essentially in the movie The Guitar, this woman gets diagnosed with cancer. And so she goes about completely changing everything about her life. She quits her job, she takes up guitar, she starts kind of sleeping around with a bunch of people because she never really fully lived her life. She spends money frivolously, she does all of these things. And then she goes back to the doctor like 6 months later to get a checkup to see how she's doing, and all of the cancer in her body is gone. And the doctor says, "What did you change?" And she says, "Everything," right? And that's exactly what I want you to connect to, which is gonna lead into the third step also, but the recognition that your body created whatever is going on. And I'm gonna get into that a little bit later about understanding what diseases really are. But your body created this, your body can uncreate it or eliminate it. And in order to do that, I would just change everything about my lifestyle. So just looking at me, and this is what I would do, I would immediately go on a 7-day water-only fast. And this is just to essentially give my body the space to heal. The body is the most advanced healing mechanism on the planet. And so part of the reason that the body doesn't heal on a regular basis is because we're constantly eating a bunch of shitty food and we're exposed to stress and we're doing all of these things. And so the body's spending all of its energy on these things. So when you eliminate food, the body has the time to do what it does best, which is to heal. So I would go on a 7-day fast. The second thing I would do in this changing everything is I would eliminate all sugar. I would eliminate all carbs. I would probably personally go on like a 21-day vegan only diet. I would also continue to intermittent fast, meaning I would cut off what I ate around probably like 4 p.m. every day, and I wouldn't eat again until 8 a.m. the next day. I would of course eliminate all alcohol, which I've already done in my own life, but if I was drinking alcohol, I would eliminate all alcohol. So these would be the critical factors. Now, this isn't something that you would have to stay on forever, but you do have to create a dramatic change. And I'm not even saying that vegan is what you have to be on, but I'm just saying the vegan diet would, again, give your body more space. If you're eating just fruits and vegetables, the body doesn't need a lot of processing power to process those things, so it can focus on the healing. Eventually, you can reintroduce meat into your lifestyle, but what we don't want to do is fall back into the same things that led us to this point in the first place. Most people will come up with excuses why they don't do this, even after getting a crazy diagnosis, like you're gonna die, you have heart disease, and they'll continue to drink beer, and they'll continue to eat the steak, and they'll continue to buy the French fries, and they'll tell themselves this lie that they would rather be dead than be living this life of restriction. And so this is just another limitation of the mind, which we're gonna get into in the later parts of this video. But we just need to recognize that we need to stop doing everything that we've done that has created this disease from within. Okay, step 3 is also simple. I would just move my body. So, I'm already exercising, so I would just exercise more. I would make health my priority. So it would become before making money, it would become before spending time with friends and family. Health would be my number one. So it would be the first thing that I do every single day, and I would move my body every day. If you've never done any exercise, I would start with walking. If you're already into exercise, I would hire a personal trainer so that you're exercising properly. Even though you say, I can't afford to hire a personal trainer, your life is completely changed, remember? So the things that you once did, like going out for dinner, drinking, socializing, those are all eliminated. You're gonna have all the money that you need to pay for a personal trainer when you prioritize health instead of entertainment. The fourth thing I would do, and this is something you can start working on right now, even if you don't have a diagnosis, is I would assemble a healing team. And so 1 would be that doctor already, 2 would be your personal trainer, 3 would be a nutritionist, which I have a friend of mine who's a nurse practitioner, and she really understands the gut and the microbiome, and so she would be the person I would go to for food. I would probably also order a Viome test, which is a test where you take a stool sample, you send it away, they tell you all of the things that are going on in your microbiome and what you need to change in your diet or add in your diet to nurture that. So that would be part of my healing team. I also have healers. There's this woman, Lori Wilson, who does medical intuition scans. I would get her to do a scan. I have my mentor, my business partner, Andrew, who knows more about food and overall level of health than anybody. I would hire a spiritual mentor or a coach, or I would get connected with somebody so that I could start undoing the belief systems, like believing that everything that doctor says is right. I would have this healing team assembled so that anytime something goes wrong in my life, I just go to my healing team and say, okay, what has gone wrong so that we can make the correction as quickly as possible. So the question for you now is, who is on your healing team? Now, as we move into step 5, this is where we get into like more of the nitty gritty. This will be controversial. I'm sure I'll get a bunch of slack, but diseases don't exist. And so what do I mean when I say that? Essentially, when we get diagnosed, let's just use cancer. Essentially, if we get diagnosed with cancer, we immediately give all of our power to cancer. So like you see the signs on the back of people's cars that say, fuck cancer, right? What we're saying is that there's this thing that's out there and it's come and got us, but that's not what's happened. Cancer is essentially a manifestation in the body of being exposed to all kinds of toxins, and cancers, tumors, are the body's defense to try and contain those toxins, right? And so then we call it a tumor and then we label it as cancer. The second we label anything, we are then giving it power. All a disease is a collection of symptoms that we have given a name, right? So if you got plaque in the arteries and you have tightness in the chest, you have heart disease, right? And so now you are helpless to this disease. So the idea around diseases don't exist is to take back your power. If you've given all of your power to a label, then you will be helpless. But to recognize that a disease is just a label, then we can take our power back. When we think a disease has come and got us, we think we were powerless or helpless to do anything about it. But when we recognize that the symptoms that we are now calling a disease is just a reflection of what has been happening inside of our own body, if we're eating like shit, if we're not moving, if we're stressed to the max, we develop physical symptoms. Those physical symptoms can be reversed and repaired, but not if we give all the power to the label of a disease. So we want to get into this realization that we have the power, and this disease that doesn't exist, is just a label, has no power over us whatsoever. Okay, and the last step is probably the only step that you actually really truly need, and it's to understand that what you hold in mind tends to manifest. So the second you're given a diagnosis by a doctor, you immediately move into the fear of dying, the fear of getting sicker, the fear of not being there for your loved ones. And so the mind will just spew out information, thought after thought after thought, about not wanting to get sicker, not wanting this thing to spread, not wanting it to get worse. And if we focus on a problem, we end up getting more of that problem. What you hold in mind tends to manifest. The thing you think about most continues to show up in your life. And like literally, I've observed this so many times in my life. My wife's cousin literally just gave herself appendicitis, literally, because her whole entire life, that has been her biggest fear, that her appendix was gonna go. And finally at 27 years old, her appendix went. It's because she had this fear. She was constantly thinking about it, and eventually it shows up. Now the good news is that we can use this in reverse as well. We can begin to hold in mind more positive things, and then we will only have good things show up into our lives. But the problem with that is that if what we hold in mind tends to manifest in the body, for example, my wife's cousin, she held in mind that her appendix was gonna burst, and that's essentially what happened. If you're stressed out, if you're stressed to the max, you're stressed at work, you're stressed about money, eventually that will manifest as symptoms in the body. So you're finally forced to take that break. But what is causing the things that we hold in mind? That is the deeper question. And this is a result of our level of consciousness. So what we hold in mind shows up in our body. So what is happening that is creating those thoughts? And that is a result of our soul or our consciousness. And the level of consciousness that we are currently at is what creates thoughts and what manifests into our body. So for example, if you are an angry person and you're constantly angry at the world, you will constantly find situations to be angry at, right? That anger will be held inside the body as stress and eventually may show up as a physical symptom. So when things actually finally show up as a physical symptom, it's essentially the last straw. This is like rock bottom. This is like the body saying, I can't take it anymore, and it finally manifests in the body, right? And so this is like a very scary thing. It is also a wake-up call to say, hey, I need to begin to change my thinking. Well, how do you change your thinking? You become aware of the level of consciousness that you're at. How do you do that? You just start listening to what you tell yourself on a daily basis. And so if you're telling yourself constantly that you have a fear of getting sick, if you tell yourself that you have a fear that this cancer is going to spread, then that is exactly what's going to show up for you. So when we begin to observe these thoughts, what we can do is we can then begin asking ourselves, well, what is it that we're so afraid of? Oh, we're so afraid of dying. Oh, okay. Why are we so afraid of dying? Well, we probably saw someone close to us die. Why are we so afraid of stroke? Why are we so afraid of heart attack? We probably saw somebody else, right? This goes back to like the story of the Buddha, right? He was this prince that was locked in this castle. Not locked, but he was protected from all of the bad in the world. And finally, when he decided to leave the castle, the first thing he saw was a poor person, and he immediately developed the fear of poverty. The second thing he saw was a sick person, and he immediately developed the fear of being sick. The third thing he saw was a dead person, and he immediately developed the fear of death. And so if we can start to unpack what our level of consciousness is feeding our thoughts, then we can start recognizing that we have the power to lean into that thing that we're avoiding. We can lean into the fear of dying. We can lean into the fear of becoming more sick. And then once we lean into that fear and we face it, instead of resisting it by trying to come up with ideas and solutions on how to fix everything, constantly thinking about how to get out of this, what we're saying is that we can't handle this thing. We can't be in this fear. We can't handle this fear, so we need to solve for it. What we're telling ourselves is that we are in it. And so instead of running from it through trying to figure it out, what we want to do is turn towards the thing that we're avoiding. And when we do that, then the mind begins to silence. We don't need all of these thoughts protecting us from this fear that we've been avoiding our whole entire lives. We feel the anger, for example. We no longer need all of these angry thoughts to keep us in the state of anger. We have transcended that. We create more space. In doing that, things begin to shift in our lives. We start taking better care of our bodies. We start becoming more aware of what we're holding in mind. We start to notice triggers that we would label as stress, and we start to lean towards that pain, and we become less stressed. We become more calm. And this all allows the body to finally kind of breathe this sigh of relief. Instead of being tensed up in this constant state of fight or flight, it finally relaxes. And in doing so, then the body can get to work in doing what it needs to do. And this is where miraculous healings happen. So when we learn to move up the scale of consciousness, a level of consciousness 600, which is a level of love, it's essentially enlightenment. When you get to enlightenment, that state is so powerful that if you tried to open your mouth in that state, you would just cry because it's just so beautiful. It's like such a beautiful feeling. Just spending 1 minute in that state of consciousness could heal anything that you may be diagnosed with. And we call this ascension to levels of consciousness and experiencing high levels of consciousness in the modern world as miracles. But this is what is possible for all of us. So essentially, what I'm trying to get at is if you solve at a level of consciousness, at a spiritual level, at a soul level, and you heal from that space, you heal the fearful consciousness, you heal the angry consciousness, you heal the shameful consciousness, the body will respond, the mind will respond, and then the body will respond. And this is actually how we heal. So step 1 through 5 are all very practical, actionable items that I would probably do. But all you really need is step 6. You need to heal at a soul level. What I found from my own personal practice, though, is that most people have to go through the body, then the mind, and then they move to the soul. So these are the steps that I would take in order to create a dramatic healing no matter what I was diagnosed with. Is I would focus at a soul level and understand what I'm telling myself on a daily basis, because those thoughts are repeating in our minds tens of thousands of times. And if we don't ever do anything about it, that which we are holding in mind will show up in our lives. So you can see how critical it is to begin shifting what is held in mind. And we do this by beginning to observe the mind and connect to the level of consciousness that we're at and learning how to move up the scale of consciousness. And in doing that, the body will heal. This is what I would do if I was ever diagnosed with anything. I would go through these exact 6 steps. I hope this served you. I'd love to hear what you have to think in the comments. If you got any value whatsoever from watching this video and you want to see more just like this to help you move up the scale of consciousness, then I kindly ask that you just like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.